So we got a pretty exciting piece of news from Bethesda Game Studios today, and that is that they actually opened a new location in Austin, Texas. Bethesda Game Studios, as you probably know, is the developer behind Fallout 4 and Fallout 3 and of course the Elder Scrolls series. I'm making a lot of videos about them and they only just released this tidbit of news today, so we're going to analyze it, look at some of the factors that do change as a result of this, and maybe some predictions as to what this could mean. So right off the bat, let's actually get into some of the details of this new studio. It actually isn't a brand new studio, it was the old Battlecry Studios. You guys may have heard of this. The game Battlecry was kind of the one thing the studio was making, and of course the name of the studio as a result. We saw some E3 interviews and footage from 2014, but following that we actually didn't see much more going on with that game Battlecry. But then that studio did move on to work on Doom, the game that came out pretty recently and obviously a lot of people really did enjoy. These guys were already owned by ZeniMax, the same company that owns Bethesda Game Studios and Bethesda Softworks. So today what's actually happening is we're not really getting a new studio, it's just that old studio that ZeniMax owned is now kind of being reassigned to Bethesda Game Studios, and of course thus Todd Howard. Although the studio itself is actually going to have its own director, that with Doug Mellencamp. This guy worked on a bunch of different games, most notably Star Wars Galaxies back in the day of like 2005 and all that. From there he actually moved on to Star Wars The Old Republic, and then most recently, as I did mention, he was the technical director on Doom. So that pretty much brings us to right about now. Although this announcement is fairly large, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a big change in the studio itself. If you check out some of Bethesda's hiring, there's very few positions or large positions for this new studio. It seems like the staff they have there already is going to remain, and either they've already been working on something, considering Doom came out quite a while ago, or they're not going to be really shifting focus onto something that's quite large, or that would require additional hirings. The announcement of this new studio though is pretty interesting. At the end of 2015, we got another announcement, that being Bethesda Montreal. When that was announced, they kind of said it's going to be working on PC and mobile games. Since then, through some of the job hirings, it was speculated that they were actually working on a mobile game of some sort. I personally still think this is going to be another tandem launch. So let's say they announced Starfield at this year's E3. They're also going to have a Starfield mobile game similar to what they did with Fallout 4 and Fallout Shelter. That was very successful and they made a lot of money on both platforms. Although before that, Bethesda Montreal was also responsible for Fallout and Skyrim VR, and Skyrim Special Edition, which originally was just an internal test. Alright, so that's a ton of information, but what does it actually mean and why should you be excited about it? Well, what we know about Bethesda is they said they want to work on a ton of new AAA games all at the same time, and a lot of them are going to be coming out before the next Elder Scrolls game. There's a lot of stuff going on. We know they want to be working on new things. For whatever reason, they want to make new IPs outside of just Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. I think it's pretty likely that we may see one of those new IPs getting announced at this current E3, and if not this one, definitely the next one. But in addition to that, they have two massive franchises that are producing them literally billions of dollars. Fallout 4 in the first week was rumored to have made Bethesda $1 billion in revenue. When Bethesda originally announced that they want to be working on all these new games, and all of this before the next Elder Scrolls, it didn't really make a ton of sense. At the time, it was simply Bethesda Maryland. It's like the main studio that made Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and pretty much the Bethesda you know and love. But now that we have these two subsequent studios being opened within 3 years of each other, it seems like that two new IPs before the Elder Scrolls 6 thing could be a lot more plausible and potentially a lot sooner. If a typical game development cycle takes 3 to 5 years, if you only have one studio working on that, you're talking about 9 to 15 years before the next Elder Scrolls would realistically be announced. But now that you have two smaller subsequent studios also aiding in that development or building spin-offs, something like that, the time frame for a lot of these projects moves up significantly. So if you're a fan of any of Bethesda's games, whether that be the Fallout franchise or the Elder Scrolls franchise, I think this new studio really indicates that we're going to be seeing more of those games and sooner. Bethesda knows how much money they're making off of this, and I have said time and time again in videos, they would be very foolish to walk away from the massive pile of cash by leaving 6 to 7 year windows in between game releases like they have done in the past. Basically what I'm saying is, rather than Fallout 5 coming out in another 5 to 10 years, it might be 3 to 4 instead. Something also interesting to note is, the last time Bethesda opened a new studio or announced a new studio, they made a port of a different game or a remaster. I've been talking about months now how I think Bethesda would be very smart to actually remaster one of the older Fallout games so you could get mod support and thus a ton of new sales on consoles. This very well could be the task of this new studio. Doom came out a while ago in 2016 and Battlecry Studios hasn't really had a lot going on since then. It's also pretty interesting to know when they announced this. E3 is only 3 months away, PAX is only 3 weeks away. They could have waited for one of those major conventions, but they chose not to. I don't really know what that means, but it seems like it had to be a conscious decision on their part. Or maybe in the end, what this really is just a standalone studio to really pump out that Creation Club content. That's pretty much gonna wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed as always, but for today's psych fun fact of the day, your touch pathway is actually significantly faster moving than your pain pathway. They're both handled by different cells and nerves and things like that in your body, but just in general, your body will process pain significantly slower than it does touch. So even though you may realize you hurt yourself, there's a noticeable delay between when you actually just touch it and you might feel whatever's going on and when it actually starts to hurt. That's another one of those things where I feel like I've experienced it in my general life, but then actually learning about it gave me some interesting insight on it. That's it. As always, again, thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.